In a world where it seems totally normal to listen to a podcast about the Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos podcast, brought to you by Funny Bone Broth. My name is Ben Grant, joined as always by JB. We've got a huge episode for you today with some big news. A lot of things happened this week. It was a very busy week in Argoland with all sorts of information coming out. But the biggest story is unquestionably the fact that there will be a 2021 CFL season. The Board of Governors met today, just moments ago as we're recording this on Monday, and voted unanimously in favor of having a 14-game season over 16 weeks, so 2 byes per team, with the season culminating in a December 12th Grey Cup in Hamilton. Initial reaction, JB, we're having a season. What do you think?
Thank God.
No kidding.
It's great to see. We both believed and defended the Argos as supporters of the season. I think that's proven out to be true. And it's great news for the players. It's great news for the fans. I think it's great news for Toronto, specifically for us, getting a chance to watch the Argos and this roster. It's fantastic news.
The commissioner made a couple of statements. He said, this is an exciting day for Canadian football and for Canada itself, which I thought was a really big statement, but it's true. It's the sense of relief. Certainly my Twitter line is just jam-packed with people celebrating, and pretty much every celebration and relief meme that you can think of is recycling itself through my Twitter feed. He also said, we're on track to receive all the necessary health and safety approvals thanks to our tireless medical advisors and staff and the dedicated government officials who have been working with them. And while the outlook for fans in the stands varies from province to province, we are confident the process is also on the right track. So we're not getting into specifics here as to how many people are going to be in the stands for each team. Obviously, that's going to vary. Every province is in a different place right now. But none of that seems to matter at this point. The vote went through. And so regardless of what goes on, I believe there's going to be a season. And I still find myself, I don't know, not doubting. I don't. I'm very optimistic about this. I felt there was going to be a season. And yet there's something inside me, I think because of what we went through last year, where I just kind of want to see people on the field. And I'll feel better at that point, regardless of what everyone says. I feel like this is now inevitable. But I want to see players in helmets on a football field. And then I will feel, perfectly comfortable with this.
Maybe. They never said there would be a season last year. I'm going to take them at their face that this is a go. I don't have any concerns. I believe that the season is 100% a go. This was the only hurdle left to be dealt with. And they are having camp, and the season is a go. I wouldn't have even a moment of concern. I think that this is a done deal.
On a personal note, for somebody who runs a weekly podcast about a football team, doesn't it feel good to know that we will have football games to talk about, JB?
Yeah, of course. Enough with the talking about whatever.
What will be new players, new signings. Yeah, no, it'll be nice to have games. I can't wait to be talking about actual football games. And it's not that far away now. That's what's nice about this coming now. It's, I guess, the only positive of this coming now and not back in February is we're getting pretty close. August 5th start date. We're a month and a half away from the season beginning. Camp is I've heard July 10th. That's the date that I keep hearing from everyone I've talked to. I haven't seen anything official on that yet, but yeah, that's camp starting up in less than a month's time. So yeah, I'm really excited about this. They also said as part of this release that the schedule will be coming out tomorrow, the full 2021 CFL schedule. So that's something that we can certainly talk about on next week's podcast. What are you looking for? What are you hoping for when you look at that schedule and you open it up? What do you want to see for the Argos?
I would love to see Ottawa first. And then after Ottawa, I would love to see Montreal. And then after Montreal, I would like to see a strong Western team. And then after that, I'm good to go with everything. I'd love to see a couple of games that they could ease into. and then an immediate measuring game, against Saskatchewan or potentially Winnipeg, and then off to the race. And then after that, I think everything's fine. I'm not that worried about what the schedule would be, but I would love to have some Eastern Conference games to start the season off, and I believe we probably will.
I had a similar wish list. I was asked this question by Marshall Ferguson last week when I was co-hosting the breakdown with him, and I came out with Ottawa, BC, Ottawa. That's how I wanted to open the season.
You have to, dip your toe in the pool early. I don't think you want 4 games against inferior opposition.
I'm not so sure we don't. I think it's going to take some time. I think it's going to take like 6 weeks to really get going.
I do believe it's important to really get pushed by a team to see where the bar is. I do. I think that you don't just want to play easier teams. I think it is important to even get your butt kicked, and that has a refocusing ability that cannot be simulated.
I agree, but I don't know if I want to see that happen week 1.
No, week 3.
I still don't know if I want to see that happen week 3.
Yeah.
I think I agree you need a check at some point, but I just think I would rather dip into the positives for a few more weeks than what you've got laid out. But I'd be happy with those first 2 games you got laid out. Opening with Ottawa, Montreal, terrific. I don't think that's going to happen. I have a pretty strong feeling we're going to be opening against Hamilton.
Yeah.
And I'm not excited about that because
on the flip side, that is a major concern. We definitely do not want a gauntlet opening of Hamilton, Winnipeg, Saskatchewan, or something. Jeez,
that would be a bye week 1, and then Hamilton, Winnipeg, Saskatchewan.
I'd be shocked if it wasn't all 4 Eastern teams playing each other off the bat.
I think it probably will be. I was thinking of how they would construct this because initially my thought was we're going to be all out west to start. And I still think that's a possibility. I still think we could see week 1, everyone's out west.
Open with a 4-game Western road trip.
Well, I don't think it's going to be like that anymore. That's what I was worried about like a month ago. Now I just think it could be 1 or 2 weeks out west and then back here. Like they may do that just to be safe, but I think they might be feeling comfortable enough now where they're not going to go that route, and you will have limited travel. So it's people traveling as little as possible. So that would be a schedule where you're seeing Ottawa, Montreal, Hamilton, Toronto, and then the Alberta teams probably playing each other, and BC's probably the one that's got to make a trip. But that's something that I expect we're going to see, or maybe a BC week 1 bye, and that's Winnipeg and Saskatchewan playing each other. That would probably be the way to limit travel the most. And maybe you open with a back-to-back with those teams, a home and home, something like that. But I don't know. We'll see. I'm excited to see the schedule, and we'll talk about that more next week when we've had a chance to break it down and kind of go through it week by week and see what we can pick out of it. We saw Lisa MacLeod, the Ontario Minister of Heritage, Sport, Tourism, and Culture Industries. That is a long job title. She came out today and was talking very positively about going forward with professional sports in Ontario. Did anything stand out to you? Because there were a couple of things that made me a little nervous in what she said today. And I know we've heard her make statements before, and they've been very reserved with regards to professional sports coming back. But then suddenly today, it sounded on the surface like all systems go. Is there any reason to be nervous about this from a government standpoint?
It does bring up an interesting question. It brings up a question that has not yet been answered by governments. What is the double vax protocol for the country? These players are coming up and are largely double vaxxed, and the Canadian players, really probably by mid-July are going to be double vaxxed. It does beg the question. I was happy that they opened the door to professional sports returning, but it does feel overly cautious to suggest that the CFL should follow the protocol that is being followed in the NHL, which began in the midst of the teeth of the pandemic. And I'm all for safety, and I'm all for for protocols, but I feel it's important for them to be data driven. So I'm not entirely sure how there is not some accommodation. Even the NHL has changed their protocols for double vaxxed American teams. They don't have to follow the same bubbling that the Canadian teams do. So it is an interesting conversation because a lot of these players coming up from the States are going to be coming from basically open society, right? Most of America has basically gone into full opening. To suddenly turn that into like a December of last year bubble is going to be a huge change. So I do wonder why the government has not differentiated between unvaxxed and double vaxxed in terms of players and protocols. That seems to me to be an area that maybe, hopefully, our new chief medical officer, once Williams is out the door, may engage with.
I'm nervous about a few words that I heard in there, and it's all to do with what you're talking about, the freedom, because you hear things like cohorting and quarantining after travel and wearing masks away from the facility and away from games. And so, like you're talking about, this can't be the same as what the NHL players went through, because it's a whole different period of time. That was a period of time in which nobody at the start of that had been vaccinated. And so, of course, there were all these protocols in place. But I think it's highly unfair to ask CFL players who have been fully vaccinated to adhere to the same health and safety protocols as the hockey players before there was even vaccine distribution. I think that, and we're also talking about players that these are vastly different jobs. CFL players aren't making millions of dollars. There's a little bit of a difference there. And I think that does come into play. I think that actually matters. And I think it's unfair to ask these players to behave the same way that an athlete had to behave when there was no vaccination process at all.
Completely agree with that point. That yes, hockey players have had to go through quite a bit, but that is a trade-off for the millions of dollars that they make. I do, that is a factor that should be considered. These players are not making millions of dollars in terms of their sacrifice. Should they be asked to sacrifice more than a dentist or a teacher or a doctor or a bus driver in terms of what they should have to do? It is frustrating. It does remind me, and don't get me wrong, this is, obviously both of us are very cognizant and follow the protocols and believe in them. This is not some anti-vaxxer parade nonsense. But what we're talking about is data-driven decisions, much like for so long we accepted the cleaning theater and finally have moved past the idea of cleaning and sanitizing everything as a necessary protocol. But that took a long time for people to finally give up on, as you can tell when you go to the grocery store and you can buy disinfectant wipes again. It took a long time for the government to accept that. So I put this on the government. I agree with you. They need to come up with something like the CDC had, which is a breakdown of how things are different once double vaxxed, and that it is unreasonable to have the same protocols for a double vaxxed individual that you had for an unvaccinated individual. That's just ridiculous.
So if you had to guess right now, just looking forward, I know it's impossible to do. Every day is different, and 2 weeks from now could be an entirely different world than today. But if you had to guess, if we've got an August 5th start date, how many people are in the stands?
I'm putting a lot of hope and faith into our new chief medical officer from Kingston. I think there are going to be 5,000 fans in the crowd. I cannot believe that the Montreal Canadiens are going to be able to put their 2,500 now, and that's probably going to go up inside a rink and we're not going to be able to approve 5,000 outdoors. That would be outrageous and really counterproductive, because what is frustrating about it is it's very hard to get people to buy into and to believe in protocols if you're not transparent and logical about them. And you need to move away from certain protocols when they are no longer needed. Much like make sure you spray the doorknob after you use it. You don't need to do that. And when you say you should, it hurts your legitimacy, So I really hope that they are reasonable, and I really hope that the new CMOH, brings data-driven decision to it.
I think we're going to have more than 5,000, but fewer than 10,000. I think 10,000 is going to be an optics thing, and I think they're going to want to keep crowds below 10,000 because that extra digit, I think, means something to the government from an optics standpoint. And so I think it may end up being like 7,500 or something like that permitted in the stands, which again, I think is great. I'd be thrilled if we're at a place where we feel that we can safely go ahead with that number of people outdoors. And I think we can. I've said from the beginning, I'm far more comfortable with people in stadiums outdoors than I am with people in stadiums indoors. And we seemingly have not had a lot of issues with people in the stands indoors at basketball games, at hockey games. We haven't heard much in the way of stories of things going wrong or super spreader events coming out of stadiums. And so I'm very comfortable with these outdoor venues that we've got in the CFL hosting somewhere in the ballpark of 5,000 to 10,000 fans. I think that's great. Let's move on to a transaction that the Argonauts made this week. They released defensive back Mike Tyson out of the University of Cincinnati. He was a Seattle Seahawks 6th round pick. I was shocked at this when I saw this come across my Twitter feed. I think, and I still think, there's got to be something to this that we don't know, because to my eyes, watching Tyson play, he's a fantastic defensive back. On my depth chart, I have him penciled in as the second string free safety behind Alden Darby, and he really could play either one of the halfback positions or even that Sam linebacker spot as well. But he's a really good player. He jumps out on film, and for him to be released by the Argonauts, to me, says there's something else going on there. Maybe it's that he wants to stay south of the border and he wants to give the NFL another shot. Maybe it's just that he's decided that this isn't something that he wants to do anymore. I don't know. I don't want to speak for him. But to me, this isn't the Argonauts looking at this player and saying, no, I don't think he's going to cut it on the football field, because I just don't see that.
Maybe he looked at the protocols and felt, no, I'm good.
Maybe. I don't know. And you do wonder if there is going to be a little bit of blowback from, like you said, players that have been living in the States. And we've got a lot of both American players and Canadian players that are down in the States right now and have been for months. Guys like Johan Breskison, I think he's been living in the Chicago area during the offseason. So these guys are all coming up, like you said, from a place where there really aren't restrictions, and there haven't been for a long time. And if you've suddenly got to live this highly quarantined lifestyle when everyone else around you isn't, and you haven't been, that could be, and again, this ties into, we're not making millions of dollars, and it may not be worth it. Maybe that's the decision he made. Again, I don't want to put words in his mouth. We don't know anything, but I don't think it's about football.
It's disappointing because we were both really excited by his tape. He had a great, the fluidity at his size. He clearly had NFL level athleticism in terms of having been at camps. I was excited to see what he could be, but I hope that it was for a reason that makes him happy, and wish him all the best.
Yeah, agreed. And at least we do have, it's not like the cupboard is bare. There's a ton of guys. We've still got like 25 defensive backs to choose from, and some really skilled guys here too. And he wasn't a projected starter, so I don't think we're losing in that regard. But it is too bad. He was one of the guys I was most excited about seeing in camp. So It's unfortunate, but such is the life of a professional athlete. And hopefully we find out that the reason he's not going to be with the team is that he had an NFL opportunity and wanted to go pursue that.
Yeah, it is. It is an interesting mix this year because NFL camp. Well, usually the CFL has no crossover with NFL camps, and NFL camps are going to begin almost the same time. So it will be interesting to see if there is any impact to that.
And we've already seen a few players get picked. Like I know BC had their pockets picked a little bit just a couple of weeks ago, because it's that time of year where NFL teams are trying to put rosters together, and typically that's not an issue because, like you said, we're several months ahead of the game. But yeah, I don't know. I couldn't decide if this is better or worse for the CFL in that aspect. I think it's actually probably better, but I don't know because we've never been through it. So I guess we'll have to see. Let's talk about this training camp and what that might look like. So again, the dates I have heard from several different people now, July 10th. That's the date I've heard Argos training camp is starting. There's nothing official. I haven't even heard it officially from someone that has said, don't tell anyone. I've just heard rumors right now that we're talking about Saturday, July 10th as being the beginning of camp. And that players are expected to quarantine a week before to come in, quarantine, and then continue on with camp. And we have heard the Toronto Star reporting just yesterday, I believe, that the Argonauts training camp is going to be at the University of Guelph. I initially didn't like that. When I first heard that they were going to be in Guelph, well, one, it's a drive for me, and if I don't even know what kind of training camp there's going to be in terms of protocol, I don't know if any media is going to be allowed. I don't know if we're going to be able to go and see. I assume at some point there'll be some sort of ability for us to take a look at what's going on in camp, but I don't expect it to be with the freedom of years past. And Guelph is a distance away. But the more I thought about it, the more I warmed up to the idea. The Argos have had training camp in Guelph before. I don't think. Now, the Toronto Star article I read said the last time they were there was 91, the Rocky Ishmael Grey Cup season. I feel like they were there one other time between that, but I could be wrong. But I know they've been all over the place. And it's not typically a glorious thing, Toronto Argonauts training camp. There have been some questionable facilities and fields. And, I love the idea in that Guelph is a really nice place to play football. They've got state-of-the-art facilities, beautiful fields. The weight training facilities are second to none. And I don't know what kind of access they're going to have in terms of the Guelph Griffins football facilities themselves, because I don't know what arrangements have been made. But I know that the University of Guelph have amazing meeting rooms, a gigantic locker room, and yeah, their weight room is massive. Plus all the different fields that they have access to. So if the Argos have access to all that stuff, that's unbelievable, and it's going to feel like you're really playing professional football, which sometimes it doesn't feel like that with the places they've used. So I guess we'll have to wait and see how much of those Guelph facilities they're able to use at training camp.
It definitely will be. It definitely will be from a personal point of view. If we go out to watch some work, if we get a chance, if that's an option, is obviously more of a drive than getting downtown. But I love the idea. I think that being able to be at one unified location, especially when you have so many new parts, it's smart, and it feels like pinball's fingerprints, and I support it.
A lot of NFL teams used to do this style of training camp, really up until about, 7 or 8 years ago, where you'd go to a university or college that is basically shut down during those training camp months. And you have players stay in dorms, and you have players strategically bunking together. You have positional groups arranged together. And I wonder if they've got something like that in mind, or if you're going to have players driving in every day. Like, to me, I think you're going to have more players wanting to stay on site if that's an option. And I think it will be. I think they're going to try and encourage the entire team to stay there. And maybe they use the Guelph residences. I'm not sure how that setup would be, but I love that idea, especially with this new team that has so many faces that are coming in from all over the place in terms of getting to know each other. I love that plan, if that's what this is. But I don't know. I don't know if that is the plan. I just think it's a lot to ask everybody to drive out to Guelph every day. So I think they're going to be able to offer, residence housing for players that are staying on campus. And I would encourage all of them to do that, because I think that would be a really good experience. In years past, we have seen an assortment of training camps from, like, I remember covering the Argos at the Arendelle campus in Mississauga when they're at the University of Toronto. And they were basically trailers set up, and they were all 1,000 degrees, and the fields weren't fantastic. I remember sitting in Paul Massadi's office when he was the general manager, which was this like 500-degree office that had been set up in a mobile trailer. And that was basically how all of the facilities worked. You had locker rooms that were basically converted trailers, and there was no feel of permanency. And it certainly was as far from luxurious as you could get. And I know in other years they've spent so much time on school buses transporting between one building to the other, going from weight training facilities to film rooms to field. They've had situations where they were using Don Bosco High School for film, and then getting on a school bus, driving up to York University, or I think, was it Esther Shiner or Downsview Air Force Base for practices, and then back on the bus back to Bosco, the weight room facilities in a different place. And that just, you don't feel like a professional athlete when you're going through that process. And I think you've got to tip your hat to the Toronto Argonauts for realizing that they want a better experience for their players. And I think putting it at the University of Guelph, having them there for a few weeks, is the perfect setup. So I applaud it. I wish I didn't have to drive as far, but I think for the players, for the team, it's going to be a good thing.
So as we work our way through June and we look at the world around us, which is, important, June is Pride Month in many cities, especially in Toronto. And I wanted to take a moment to do a couple of things. One, I acknowledge that the CFL has done a pretty good job of acknowledging Pride Month on their main website, on the team websites. It's easier now than it used to be, I think, for organizations and companies to adopt rainbow logos. I think it's a good first step. I'm happy about it. I think the CFL still trails the NFL in a full commitment to it. One of the great things about the NFL is the resources, LGBTQ resources that they have on their main website, and are able to have videos built with players talking about the importance of fighting for LGBTQ rights and fighting against homophobia. Don't get me wrong, the NFL is not perfect, but I do feel that they have achieved a level that the CFL hasn't yet. I would like to stay away from anything that feels like rainbow washing, which is very much a thing these days, in terms of having 1 month where you put the colors on, but are you really committed for equality and for fighting homophobia? So I thought just briefly I'd mention there really have not been a lot of openly gay players. We're still awaiting a gay player to openly come out during his playing career. Michael Sam would be the closest, of course. He was openly gay in college and then was drafted into the NFL, played in the CFL after his NFL time. But there hasn't really been a player of star level or well-known player who's come out yet. And really the hope would be that the CFL is working towards creating a league that understands we need to get rid of these ancient, idiotic attitudes about masculinity, about sexuality, about supporting sort of homophobic bullying that often really was a big part of football culture. And the one thing I wanted to mention to people is, if you get a chance to do two things really. One would be, if you get a chance to read, there's an article I'll tweet out on Outsports, which is a really terrific source of articles about the intersection between gay athletes and professional sports. Is Ryan O'Callaghan, who was drafted by the New England Patriots, and he is really an amazing person who, there's a fantastic article about how he struggled with it, how he considered suicide, how he took drugs, how he sort of really let himself go, desperate to hide his sexuality while playing in the NFL. It's a fantastic article about how he came out to his general manager, how he came out to people in the NFL, how he was supported, how much happier he is now. And I think it'll really resonate if people read the article. And he also has written a book about his time, fighting with this culture and his own personal feelings. And so if you get a chance also to pick up his book, I think that it really is an amazing story. It's called My Life on the Line, and it's important for the CFL. Of course, we know Chris Larson of the Red Blacks has been suspected of being involved or being the perpetrator of homophobic violence, of a hate crime, of really severely beating a gay individual who was simply existing and celebrating Pride in Toronto. And that obviously is vile. And the league needs to do more. And I wanted to leave with the thought that it's good that we've come a distance, but there's much more to do. And it should be a 12-month commitment and not just a rainbow washing June.
And I think what you're saying is so relevant, and it's what you don't have to look far to see the problems that still exist. There's no question that strides have been made. There were no rainbow anythings related to football going back just a few years ago. And so that is a step, but you only need to go as far as either looking at the story that you just mentioned, this tragic story, or just even going to the Twitter mentions when the CFL posts about their new logo and they've got the rainbow backdrop, or the Argonauts or whichever team, and you look at the mentions and you see the homophobia and the hate in these comments, and you realize that, yeah, we've made steps, but there are miles and miles to go still. And this all ties into the fact that, like you say, there haven't been many players that have come out during their career, because it's terrifying to. I get why there would be hesitation to, because we're not there yet. And you'll know we're there when you have players comfortably coming out during their playing career and not thinking twice about it. That's when you know that progress has definitely been made.
Football, to my mind, has a responsibility that it has incredible power and currency in society, and it needs to use that power and currency to try and challenge attitudes in an aggressive manner, and to really say that homophobia has no place and is not synonymous with strength or toughness or football mentality. And I really hope that we continue to progress.
Well, that will just about do it for us on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. As always, you can find all of our stuff on xsandargos.com. Don't forget to take some time to rate, subscribe, so that our episodes show up right there on your phone, and tell all your friends about us, especially now that we know there's going to be a 2021 season. Let Argos fans know about the X's and Argos podcast. For JB, my name's Ben Grant, saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Go, Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together fight the foe, foe,